You are welcome to online lectures with Fraternity the Schoolboy. Today we'll take a look at pharmaceutical calculations and we have a question on the board. The question says the displacement value of copper sulfate with respect to theobroma oil is 3.0. What amount of the base would be required to produce 32-gram suppositories containing 4.0% of the drug? Option A, 56.0 gram, B, 62.0 gram, C, 70.0 gram, D, 59.2 gram. The question source is Pharmaceutical Dispensing 1000 Objective Questions and Answers by Vincent C. Okore, PhD, 2001 edition, page 8, question 41. Solution. For us to be able to solve this question, we need to determine the amount of ingredients required to produce 30 suppositories. Remember that one of the suppositories weighs 2 grams, and a suppository is a dosage form containing the active ingredients, the base, and other ingredients. Remember that. Now, and we cannot just, if we want to prepare 30 suppositories, we will not just get the ingredients required for just one suppository. Then after preparing one suppository, we mix again and prepare another suppository. We mix again until we get to that. No. We get the required amount of the ingredients and mix them together to form a mass that will help us, that will give us 30 suppository. Also remember that you cannot just you will not just mix the one I'll give you exactly 30, because if you mix it, some of the ingredients may be lost during transfer or mixing, or in one step or the other, the amount of ingredients may come down. So if you measure exactly what to give you 30 suppository, you may end up preparing only 25 suppositories. So there's need for you to prepare for overage. That one is in practice. We are just doing calculations. So I just mentioned it for you to know that in practice, you need to add overage so that at the end you can get your 30 suppositories intact. So for the purpose of calculation, let's just do the calculation for 30 suppositories. Now, so we now look for the amount of ingredient required for the 30 suppositories. We are told that one suppository is 2 grams. Therefore, 30 suppository will now weigh what? X. So X is now equal to what? We cross multiply 30 suppository times what? 2 grams over what? 1 suppository. Suppository will cancel suppository. 30 times 2 grams is 60 grams. 60 grams divided by 1 is 60 grams. So the entire suppository weighs 60 grams. The entire suppository weighs 60. Entire ingredients mix for the suppository weigh around 60 grams. So, but we are told that inside each of the suppositories, or the mixture of the what to give you 60 suppository, the 60 grams, their amount of the drug inside is 4%. Amount of the drug itself here is the active ingredient, which is copper sulfate, is 4%. So since we have already calculated for the one that give us 30 suppository, so we find 4% of this 60 gram. 4% of this 60 gram will be the amount of the copper sulfate. So let's go. So 4% of 60 gram. 4% of 60 grams is equal to 4% over 100% times 60 grams. Percent will cancel percent. 0 will cancel 0. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 gram. 24 gram divided by 10 is 2.4 gram of copper what? Sulfate. Is 2.4 gram of copper sulfate. Good. So the amount of copper sulfate inside the 60 gram is 2.4 gram. Good. But if the question say we should find out the amount of base required. If care is not taken, you simply say, okay, since the entire product is 60 gram, therefore the amount of base required is 60 gram minus 2.4 gram. You fail it. For you to be able to do this thing well, you need to determine the exact amount of the base that will be displaced by copper sulfate. And for you to determine the amount of base that will be displaced by copper sulfate, you need to make use of the displacement value of copper sulfate. Now, this will take us to what displacement value is. What is displacement value? Displacement value is the of a particular substance or active ingredient is the amount of the active ingredient that is required to displace 1 gram of the base. So let's bring it down to this question now. Displacement value of copper sulfate is the amount of copper sulfate required to displace 1 gram of theobroma oil. So if the displacement value of copper sulfate is 3.0, what it means is that 3.0 gram of copper sulfate displaces 1 gram of what? Theobroma oil. So let's go. From the dV value of copper sulfate, dV of copper sulfate is 3.0. This implies that 3.0 gram of copper sulfate, let me use this, displaces, let me use this for the displacement because of space, displaces 1 gram of what? Let me use TO for theobroma oil. 3.0 gram of copper sulfate displaces 1 gram of theobroma oil. Remember, we want to determine the amount of the theobroma oil, which is the base, that will be displaced by 2.4 gram of copper sulfate. That's our target. But we already know that 3.0 gram of copper sulfate displaces 1 gram of theobroma oil. So if that is the case, 2.4 gram of copper sulfate will now displace X amount of theobroma oil. We don't know the amount 2.4 gram of copper sulfate will displace. So we make X the subject of the formula. So X is now equal to, we cross multiply 2.4 gram of copper sulfate times 1 gram of theobroma oil all over 3.0 gram of what? Copper sulfate. Gram will cancel gram, remaining 1 gram. Let's go. So 2.4 divided by 3.0 is what? This will give us around 0.8 gram. So 2.4 gram of copper sulfate will displace 0.8 gram of theobroma oil. Now, if you now want to calculate the amount of the base that you need in this preparation, you subtract the amount of the theobroma oil that will be displaced by the copper sulfate from the total amount of the ingredient required for the what? The dietary suppository. So that means we simply do 60 gram minus 0.8 gram. So the amount of theobroma oil needed is what? 60 gram minus 0.8 gram. And this will give us what? 59.2 gram. So 59.2 gram of theobroma oil is required to produce 32 gram suppositories containing 4% of what? Copper sulfate as the active ingredient. So this is the answer to the question. So let's look at the option. Option A says 56.0, no. B says 62.0 gram, no. C says 70.0, no. Why D says 59.2? So this is the answer. The answer it was 59.2 gram of the what? The base, which is theobromine oil.